Child prisoner 16 dies after being beaten to a pulp at a young offenders institution. This has popped up on a few articles that I've been researching online, people, and it's something that needs to be heard on broadcast, because you will not hear about these type of incidents and these type of topics unless you're watching Behind Bars TV. Now, I have got a few different articles and I have looked into a few different things, and it was in HMP YUI Feltham, which is a notoriously dangerous prison. Now, this happened on April the 20th, which was on Monday night. And this is something that should not have happened to a 16-year-old boy. I'm going to go through the first article, and then I've got some other ones. I'm going to tell you a little bit about Feltham Prison, because like I've just said, there were some unexpected reports done as well on Feltham Prison, and it was deemed one of the most dangerous and violent prisons in England, for the simple fact as well, because HMP Feltham houses up to 800 individuals, which are, majority of them, they've got Feltham A and Feltham B, and a lot of the young'uns that are in there are gang members. And the location of it is in Feltham, which is London, and it's for juveniles and the category C adult male. When it says adult male prison as well, you do think, unless you know, that it's for men, which is over the age of 21, but there's still teenagers and youngsters ranging from 18 to 21, which is classed as a young adult. So it was formed in 1991 as a result of a merger between Feltham Borstal and the Ashford Remand Centre. So I will talk a little bit more about the prison after I tell you about this death of the youngster inside of the prison, which is being looked at, and it does look suspicious, and it does seem as though it could be a murder case. But like I've said as well, a lot of these youngsters that are in there from London are all gang members, and what happens if you lock up a load of gang members? They bump into gang members from other areas, and this is why it's been deemed one of the most dangerous and violent prisons, because these gang members are attacking each other inside of prison. They're taking the beef from the streets and into the prison. So the 16-year-old boy was said to have been found unresponsive in his cell at the prison in southwest London on Monday. Prison staff called for an ambulance and the teenager was taken to hospital, where he was pronounced dead 2 hours later. It was only his girlfriend, who asked not to be named, said the teenager suffered from a heart condition but did not believe that was the cause of his death. And when she was asked to examine the body, he appeared to have suffered severe injuries. So a spokesman from the Scotland Yard said the death was being treated as unexpected. Obviously, they're looking into the case to see what has actually went on. And they went on to say on Tuesday the 21st at 12:05 a.m, police were notified by staff at Feltham Prison and the Young Offender Institute about the death of a boy who had been found unresponsive and later died in hospital. The London Ambulance Service was called at 9:30 p.m. on Monday, April the 20th, and treated the boy aged 16 before taking him to hospital, and he sadly died at 11:43 p.m. So why was the ambulance service called at 9:30 p.m? Bang up in the prisons is normally around about 7 o'clock. 8 o'clock at the latest. 7 o'clock bang up. So whether or not whatever's happened inside of that pad. The door might have been slammed. He might have been put in his bed or whatever, which has happened previously. So it looks as though he's asleep. And when they're doing the roll call, which is could be roundabout that time, it's the last roll call before they don't check again until the morning, which is normally sometimes 5, 6, 7 o'clock in the morning. But what they do, they bang on the door. Hello, if they're walking wrong, they open the flap. And if someone's in the pad, they've got to get a signal from them. That's what I mean by the bang. I know myself. Been there, experienced it. And you've got to go like that so they can see that you're alive and kicking. And in this case, he obviously wasn't. And that's why it's been 9:30 p.m. when the ambulance has been called. At this stage, the death has been treated as unexpected and inquiries remain ongoing. A post-mortem examination will take place in due course. Then it will come out that it was a murder. The young man's girlfriend said she had identified his body at a West Middlesex hospital. His body had been beaten to a pulp. He was covered in scuff marks and bruises. We had to look at him through a glass window. We weren't allowed to say goodbye properly. But I'm not going to insinuate anything here because we do not know at this early stage. But it could have been prison officers, could have been prisoners. We don't know at this stage, but what we do know, as the girlfriend said, he was beaten to a pulp. And it says we are confused. We don't know how he died. He did have a heart condition, but it is one that is very rare to die from. His mother is completely broken. She was originally told he had died in the prison, but then later told it was in hospital, so we don't know what happened. He had been in trouble, but he was 16, a child, and should have been protected. He should have been. He's a gang member because that's what I've read on another article. But even though he's a gang member, they've got to have protection inside a prison. And he had been in trouble, it said. It's a complete disgrace that this has happened. But I will tell you a little bit about what he was actually in prison for. And the prison heads may roll for this. They said the revelations at the coroner's court might actually shut Feltham down once and for all. It does say in an article that in November, the staff at the prison accused of criminal offences were being permitted to quietly resign or transfer to avoid police probes. Watchdogs concluded in 2024 that Feltham, a young offenders institution and prison for men aged 18 to 35, which I'm going to talk about in a minute because it says 18 to 21 in Feltham B. But I did read in another article that said up to the age of 30 adults, and it does say here up to the age of 35, probably something to do with the overcrowding. In 2019, it was subject to an urgent notification from the prison's inspectorate, but a follow-up inspection last August found levels of violence were still as high as anywhere in the UK. Now, they should not be holding adults from the age of 21 to 35 or 30, whatever it is, in the same institute as young offenders who are aged 16 to 18. Yes, there's Feltham A and Feltham B, but they can still communicate, they can still shout when we're walking past, going through fences or whatever, and these older fellas who are in with gangs as well could be sending orders over to the youngsters saying, do this youngin's involved in this, or he's attacked someone from our gang, get him sorted out, send a bit of spizzle over or whatever, or tell them because the youngsters don't give a fuck, 16, 17, 18-year-old gang members, never had a good upbringing, haven't got good role models, don't give a fuck, haven't got that sense, and they're getting told by the elders to go and do an act of violence against someone else in the prison. They'll do it without a second thought. They won't even care about the consequences. So the youngster, let me tell you now, where we at? So, friends of a child prisoner who died after being found unconscious in his cell are calling for a thorough investigation into his unexpected death. So, Ida Duarte, 16, was being held at Feltham Young Offenders Institution while awaiting sentence for stabbing another teenage boy in Brighton. And like I say, it's come out that he's a gang member, and this could be something to do. It could be retaliation. He's been involved in a stabbing, and he's waiting to get sentenced. So his girlfriend, like I've mentioned before, says he wasn't the person everyone painted him to be, regardless of his convictions. No one saw him behind closed doors. They only saw the persona he was forced to have when he was outside. To me, he was so different and extremely lovable, which is normally the case. Youngsters living on these fucking rough areas. I mean, I grew up in a rough area, but the areas up in the northeast, the council estates, haven't got a patch. We thought our grown up and our young's lives were fucking chaotic, which they were, and rough on rough council estates. But I can only imagine what it's like down in London, where they're forced to be fucking part of a gang, because it's all the postcode wars and it's a whole lot different. They're carrying big machetes, they're carrying guns, and like I say, they're getting told to do things by the elders, and they have to do it, they have to act on it. And this has been a gang affiliation. He's attacked another gang member, and that's what he's in prison for, awaiting sentence. But like I've said, they haven't had a good upbringing. They haven't got no fucking good role models in their life. They know no other, and they get involved in this. And I can see why they do it, to fit in, because that's the way they've been brought up. And his girlfriend says he's not the person everyone sees on the outside. He's different. She sees the loving side of him. Steps out the door into the gang warfare. You've got to be that fucking person, which is an absolute shame and a travesty, because he's ended up in prison, 16-year-old, and he's now fucking dead. So she says his body was a crime scene and we could only view him through the glass. We were denied a proper goodbye before he went into the morgue because the police needed to preserve forensic evidence on his body. A Met Police spokesman said they were notified, like I mentioned earlier on, and at this stage the death has been treated as unexpected. No arrests have been made and inquiries remain ongoing. A post-mortem examination will take place in due course, like I've just said earlier, and I do believe this will probably end up being a murder case. So Duarte, who lived in Camelford Street, Brighton, was due in court this week to appeal his conviction for a stabbing in Lavender Street, Brighton, but the hearing had been cancelled after his death in hospital following the attack at Feltham Young Offenders Institution. See, so now, in this article, what I'm reading further on, it says following the attack. So, it's going to be a murder case. Two of the teens were also charged with assaulting the victim of the stabbing, one of whom was convicted and one was acquitted. They were also found guilty of breaching gang injunctions which banned them from being in each other's company. So Feltham Institution, which I've just mentioned before, is absolutely fucking chaotic. It's a young offender institution in Category C adult prison located in southwest London, divided into two sections. Feltham A for boys aged 15 to 18. Feltham B, Category C prison for young men 18 to 21, but they've extended it up to the age of 30. So recent inspections and independent monitoring reports have highlighted significant safety and operational concerns. Extreme violence reports from July 2024 branded Feltham A, which was the young'uns, as the most violent prison in England and Wales. Incidents of disorder were found to have tripled over a 2-year period. And prolonged confinement, an independent monitoring board report, from February 2025 found that some inmates were being locked in the cells for 22 hours a day. A 15-year-old or 16-year-old young'uns, kids, with no fucking sense of direction, being chucked in a pad for 22 hours a day with nothing but their fucking music, shouting at each other out the windows, bravado, testosterone running through them, talking about violence, gangs, and not giving a shit with no sense of direction. I've had two lads on here who I've interviewed for podcasts. Dubzino from Ireland, shout out Dubzino, and Ginger J from down London. I've interviewed both of these on a podcast and they have both been in this prison and they said how fucking violent that jail is. Although there is government target of 15 hours of education per week, reports indicate that many children receive significantly less or none due to chronic staffing shortages and safety restrictions. Keeping kids 15 to 16-year-old in those fucking conditions, gang members, no sense of direction. Absolute travesty. Gang management as well. Safety measures involve over 260 different non-mixing instructions to prevent violent gang-related disputes between inmates. And that is Feltham Prison, which has been fucking deemed one of the most violent in England and Wales. But I'm going to leave that one there for now, people. I thought I would just bring you that and give you some details about HMP YUI Feltham and what type of prison it is and what goes on inside of there. It is an absolute shithole, hellhole. The youngsters are being kept in an absolute fucking shit state. That prison needs massive reforms and those youngsters need a chance. But locking them up in the same establishment, even though they're not in the same wings or building, Feltham A and Feltham B, but having adult prisoners in the same establishment where they can send instructions or whatever over to get the youngsters done in, it is absolute travesty, and that prison is an absolute shithole, hellhole, and those youngsters are not going to come out any different. They'll be going out worse, with more fucking friends, more crews, more knowledge about criminality, more connections, and it is not going to do any good whatsoever. But I'll leave that one there for now, people. Hopefully you are enjoying the content, and if you are, remember to comment, like and subscribe. Take care, people, but most importantly, stay safe.